is Jeremiah Knope, one of the pastors at North Center Church in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. This is the 5th video related to politics in the church as we lead up to the presidential election next month. In recent videos, I've made some strong statements regarding the LGBTQIA2S plus agenda in this election. And so what I want to do in this video is talk a little bit more about why that issue is so important as it relates to the upcoming election. Why is it that so many Christians like myself are making such a big deal over the issue of sexual identity or sexual orientation, particularly when it comes to the 2024 election? Like, why do we as Christians care at all what other people do in the privacy of their own bedrooms? Why does it matter what kind of relationships people choose to pursue? And what gives Christians the right to impose their antiquated morals onto others? You've heard people talk this way. Why can't we just live and let live? Just mind your own Christian business already. But here's the thing. Live and let live was exactly how many professing Christians operated for decades. But it turns out that what begins as cultural tolerance, live and let live, eventually becomes an issue of mandatory acceptance. And when acceptance gains enough momentum, it eventually becomes an issue of mandatory celebration. I mean, just think what the church tolerated just a generation ago is now a multicolored flag that flies above church buildings all over the city in which I live. So why do we care what people do in the privacy of their own bedroom? Because if we tolerate it behind closed doors, then eventually it will demand that we devote the entire month of June to celebrating it. You see, it becomes a parade across the city. It becomes an underlying theme in almost every television show. It becomes the public scenery in our city parks. It becomes a tax-funded class in our government schools. It becomes a flag waving above businesses and liberal church buildings. And eventually, it becomes so ingrained into the mainstream fabric of a society that business owners like Jack Phillips are taken to the U.S. Supreme Court for not catering to the demands of this sexual revolution. You see, that's the thing about planting seeds into a society. Given the right condition, small seeds have a way of growing into something radically bigger. And that's the story of the sexual revolution across our nation. At the birth of this Christian nation, when the laws of the country were being drafted, listen, sexual relationships between the same gender were viewed as an offense of so dark a nature that the very mention of it was a disgrace to human nature and a crime not fit to be named. And it was illegal in every state that existed at the time of American independence. In fact, up until the 1950s, sexual confusion like homosexuality was actually thought to be a form of illness. The Senate at the time issued a report stating that homosexuals were a national security risk because those who engage in overt acts of perversion lack the emotional stability of normal persons. Now, fast forward 250 years, and we are now reaping the fruit from the seeds of the sexual revolution that were planted, allowed to germinate, and that really began to take root in our culture sometime in the 1960s. But by the early 2000s, the tree had started taking over the whole garden. The defense of marriage Act was exchanged for the Marriage Equality Act. And then after the Supreme Court case of Obergefell and Hodges in 2015, every U.S. state officially recognized the right of all same-sex couples to, quote-unquote, get married. Thanks to our governor, my home state of Minnesota is now called a sanctuary state for transgender minors wishing to receive gender-affirming health care. So what does that mean? It means that they can come here to my state to have their bodies surgically mutilated in order and receive hormone therapy in order to look and sound like the opposite gender. We have tampons in our boys' public school bathrooms, and we're calling it child abuse when parents refuse to encourage their child's sexual confusion, leading to children actually being taken away from their parents. This is happening in our country, and now we have a presidential candidate participating in LGBTQ, etc. shows and podcasts as part of the campaign trail. This is what happens when churches refuse to engage in the political discussion, choosing rather to live and let live. But again, the question remains, why should Christians care what other people choose to do with their own bodies? Whether it's in their own bedroom or whether it's in the public square. And why in the world would I say that a party's stance on this issue is worse than anything being proposed by the other party? Which is what I said in the video on moral equivalence. As a Christian, speaking to Christians, I have 6 reasons why I think this issue is of utmost importance to followers of Jesus. And so I'm going to offer the first 3 reasons in this video, which will serve as part 1, and then I'll give the second 3 reasons in the next video. So here's reason number 1. Creation. God only created 2 genders. In Genesis 1:27, we read that God created the human race as male and female. And this issue matters because it is foundational to our existence as human beings. God did not create 72 different genders or whatever number we're up to today. He created 2 genders and only 2, and to pretend otherwise is to push against the fundamental fabric of creation itself. So why does this matter? It matters because creation realities inherently affect civil realities, because creation exists apart from civics, but you cannot have civics without creation. You get rid of the foundation and the whole structure crumbles. The essence of humanity is male and female, period. And God alone has the right to determine our gender, which is created in the womb, not in the surgical laboratory. You can order LGBTQIA2S plus t-shirts, but they still only come in 2 options, male or female. So creation. Second reason is design. This is God's only design for bringing life into the world. Anybody who is an inventor knows that systems are designed to operate a certain way. I drive a minivan. I call it the Batmobile. And it was designed to run on gasoline. Now, I can put apple juice into the gas tank if I wanted to, but then the vehicle isn't going to work. Why? Because that's not how it was designed. Now, does that mean that there's a flaw in the design? No, the flaw is in my thinking that anything other than gasoline is going to make this particular vehicle run the way it was designed to run. And the same is true with our sexuality. We can pretend that we have discovered 72 different genders, but human life only has the potential to be created when a man and a woman come together as God designed. Genesis 1:28 says, then God blessed them, and God said to them, to the male and the female, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. So why do Christians make such a big deal about monogamous heterosexual relationships? Because this is quite literally God's only plan for keeping the human population alive. Why is this issue more important than any other civic issue? Because there is no such thing as civics without people. And the LGBTQ, etc. community is biologically incapable of reproduction. Without biological men coming together with biological women, politics won't matter, because there will be no need for policies, because there will be no people. So creation, design, and third is distortion. The sexual revolution distorts the picture of the family. God designed the family to be a picture of Christ and his bride, the church, Ephesians 5:22 through 33. The Bible never refers to a same-sex relationship as a marriage. Never. Rather, it uses words like abomination, Leviticus 18:22, etc. Now, we need to clarify that the individuals themselves are not an abomination, but what they are doing is. Why? Because marriage and sex and family and children and the home, these things were designed for an infinitely greater purpose than our emotional whims. Children were designed to have a dad who can teach them what godly masculinity looks like, and to have a mom who can teach them what godly femininity looks like. Children were supposed to receive strength and protection from their dad and the nurturing and love that only a mom can give. Like, as a daughter sees the strong masculinity of her dad and the beautiful femininity of her mom, she is seeing a full-orbed picture of the heart and the strength and the compassion of her God. But when a family unit gets twisted, the picture of God gets twisted. So why? Why is a distorted marriage or a distorted family such a big issue when it comes to the 2024 presidential election? Because a distorted family is a rejection of God's design. It's a rejection of the picture that was intended to point people to God. And here it is. God does not bless nations that reject him. Now, we can sing, God bless America, but if we are brazenly rejecting his design for the family unit, we have absolutely no reason to expect that God is going to bless our country as he once did. Rather, we have every reason to expect that he is going to judge our nation, because one of the clearest examples in the Bible that God is going to judge, or that God is judging a nation, the sign is sexual confusion. Romans chapter 1, verses 18 through 32. And that leads us to the fourth reason, which is the consequences that this has on a civil society. In other words, this isn't just a moral issue with spiritual consequences. It's also a civil issue with national consequences. And so we'll begin part 2 by looking at the national consequences of the sexual revolution that has swept across our country, and why that matters so much for the 2024 presidential election. If you don't think that this issue really matters, then you've not considered the long-term consequences that this has on a society. It matters. It really matters. So we'll talk more about why it matters in the next video, part 2. Go vote.